let's now have a little bit of a talk about the famous tennis court oath and the National Assembly. Both of these are connected to the Estates General and grow out of the Estates General. So the Estates General met at the Palace of Versailles in May 1789. It was a widely anticipated event, and the Third Estate across France were excited and optimistic about the changes that this meeting would bring for them. Processions took place, crowds lined the street. We've got a huge amount of primary source material which indicates how excited people were across France. This image is of the 5th of May 1789 as members of the Third Estate walked towards the Palace of Versailles, cheered on by crowds, protected by troops. It is a public procession. It's an exciting moment. Here's another image. On the day, as you can see, perhaps in the sky in the background here, on the day that the First Estate, Second Estate and Third Estate arrived at Versailles for the Estates General's first official opening, it was raining. And the members of the Third Estate were required, or representatives of the Third Estate, were required to wait outside in the rain for 2 hours while the First and Second Estate representatives and the King went in. Apparently in those 2 hours, there were some representatives of the Third Estate who were starting to think perhaps things weren't going to change after all at this Estates General. So we can see here in this image the members of the Third Estate's representatives here in their dark, sombre business clothes of the time, crowded to the back of the room, and into the side there's a public gallery of others. We have our clergy and we have our noblemen in their white wigs. The King was there welcoming them, and he made an opening speech. And in his opening speech, Louis XVI said to the Assembly, traditions must be respected. And this must have set off some alarm bells in the minds of the Third Estate representatives. Traditions must be respected. They'd be wondering, is he really going to change the ancien regime? The King said he wanted reforms, but when we're talking about these reforms, in accordance with tradition, each estate will go to a separate chamber. And when they vote as an Estates General, each estate will get 1 vote each. And at this point, the representatives of the Third Estate were outraged. They refused to accept this. And for 6 weeks, the representatives of the Third Estate refused to accept the King's, provisions of the Estates General. For 6 weeks, they rejected the idea that they must meet separately. And for 6 weeks, they rejected the idea that they would only have 1 vote, despite their huge numbers compared to the other estates. Things were to change on the 20th of June, 1789, when the members of the Third Estate, the representatives of the Third Estate, came together to once again meet and discuss and speak about their situation, and found that the King's soldiers had locked their meeting room. Now, their meeting room was possibly locked, and we'll never quite know why, because it was a Saturday. It perhaps had just been the equivalent of a booking error like we have today. But these representatives of the Third Estate took it upon themselves to assume that the King had lost patience with them and was stopping them coming together and having a voice at all. So in defiance of the King, the representatives of the Third Estate went to this building. You can see a modern photo of it still there. It's the Salon of the Palm, the Room of the Palms, an indoor tennis court complex. And I want you to imagine something like our school halls, our indoor court areas, where they took the tennis court oath. And this oath, the famous tennis court oath, was where they vowed never to separate and to come together wherever they needed to until they had established a constitution for France. They were calling for an end to absolute monarchy. They were wanting a constitution like Britain, in which the powers of the king were defined and limited, and that the third estate, the commoners, would have a voice in government. This is the inside of that Salon of the Palm. This is the inside of the building in which the tennis court oath took place. And despite the fact you can see on the right-hand side of the image here, statues memorialising the event and some of the famous artworks and busts of the people who were here, and the symbols of France and the artwork on the wall, you can see the indoor court. It was a little bit like squash. Spectators would be along the sides. They could watch the game. There was a net strung across the middle, and the ball could bounce off the walls and off the roofs into the court of play. So a tennis court wasn't quite what we expected now. In the Jacques-Louis David artwork, which the sketch of it remains and has been recoloured, we can see what must have taken place in that room. The symbolism in the artwork is amazing. In this colorized version, we can see the oath being taken. We can see some of the figures that come to lead the revolution in place. We can even see a sans-culotte over here helping an elderly man, the revolutionary looking after the poor. We can see the upturned umbrella in the corner here, and the curtains blowing through the windows, the suggestion that this is the wind of change tearing through France. We can see the famous abstainer, one person who refused to vote and him being criticised by those around him, and another person saying, no, stop, it's his democratic right. We can see Robespierre, hands on chest, middle of frame, one of the leaders of the Committee of Public Safety, earnestly thinking this is the way forward. And the man who administers the oath is the Abbé Sales, and the Abbé Sales is the one who actually wrote the oath. He was a member of the First Estate. Notice also a member of the First Estate who has joined the National Assembly, meeting with members of the Third Estate and being greeted with open arms. So, the group that meet and take this tennis court oath now defy the king. They call themselves the National Assembly. They call for a constitution which defines and limits the powers of the king. And this is our famous tennis court oath.